Okay, so now we're taking a look at the BIOS, the UEFI BIOS in the Z87 Expert. This is BIOS version 1008. That's what we ran all our testing for, or using. And we're just going to walk you through here. This is the basic screen when you get in here. So you've got some options you can do. You can choose XMP profiles. You can set up standard fan controls, things like that. This is a drop down. It's going to give you options for other fans. So you can even drag things around to change your boot order. You can look at SATA information, boot menu, defaults. You know, you can change, you've got some shortcuts here, CPU configuration, monitor, all of that. So, and these here are your different power options. So this is kind of like your EPU mode directly from the BIOS. And when you want to get into the advanced mode where there's a lot of extra things that can be done, you just go ahead and click on advanced mode. It's going to blank out for a second, and it's going to come up in the advanced mode. Here, this is much more like a traditional BIOS, except you can use a mouse or you can use a keyboard to move around. So we'll walk through some of the things here. You do have a favorites. As you can see, we don't have any favorites set up. That lets you set up individual menu items so that you can set these here. Let's say you have a few places in the BIOS that you like to go for overclocking. You can set those up in My Favorites, get you there really quick. You have the main page, which is going to give you some basic information about everything. Set up a few notes, take a look at when the things were last modified. Of course, under AI Tweaker, this is where most of your overclocking is going to be done. You have your different options to sync all cores, the Asus multi-core enhancements. Of course, then you get down into some of their more advanced features, such as DRAM timings, the DigiPlus power control, CPU power management. There's direct links here. Click on those, it's going to take you right to it. Click back. As you can see, the UEFI BIOS has advanced quite a bit since we first saw it. This is quick. It's not, there's no lag like we used to see when this was first introduced. You click on something, you're going to get there, you click back, you're going back almost immediately. There are still some systems, some motherboard manufacturers that haven't gotten their UEFI BIOS to this level of performance. This is not clunky, this is not a pain to navigate around or to find what you want. If you go into any of these, you have direct input. So whatever you type in is what's going to go in. As soon as you click out, that's what's going to be applied. So you're not walking through any menus, you're not having to hit plus minus to go up and down or anything like that. You can still use that to change the options, but you can also directly type information in, which is important when you're dealing with a lot of these functions, you know, typing in voltages and all of that. You get a lot more control by being able to manually type in the numbers versus having to scroll through a menu or move it back and forth using a plus minus button or a space bar. All right, moving on to advanced controls. Here you have all your different links. CPU configuration. This is going to be some of the items for the CPU, such as thermal monitoring, hyper-threading, the number of cores you want to use, and of course you have another link for the power management here. So go ahead and click back. PCI Express configuration. You can take a look at that and make the changes there. Rapid start technology, which we have disabled. Smart Connect. SATA configuration, for the most part, 90% of this is going to be left alone, but this is where you would come in and you would configure this. DMI configuration, graphics configuration, you can set up everything, IGP memory, render standby, multi-monitor support, that's all going to be here. Here's your they call it NB, but this is actually on the CPU. So you've got all of this here, and you can set this up, turn it on, turn it off. Right now we don't have a video card in there, so that's not going to show up. Memory remap feature. This is if you're using memory above 4 gigs. It's typically going to be enabled. Most of your systems right now start off at 4 gigs, and some of them run much higher. All right, so we'll go back. You have Thunderbolt. Thunderbolt is, of course, Intel's newer connection that allows you to run quite a bit of information over it, including video, 4K video, high-density disk arrays, all of that. You can just push it out through Thunderbolt. You can even boot off of Thunderbolt if you want. So these are going to be your configuration settings for that. A USB, same thing. Miscellaneous configuration, PCI Express native power management. You can set that up, turn on or off. Onboard devices, turn the HD audio on. Storage controller, which is the ASM Media, Thunderbolt. What's the bandwidth mode? You have either 4x or 2x. Bluetooth, Wi-Fi controller, all of that is controllable through onboard devices, which is pretty much typical. Advanced power management, network stack configuration. And then we move on to monitors. Here, this is pretty self-explanatory. This is going to show you what's going on, and this is where your fan speed control is. You can turn it on, set it to auto. Advanced mode is going to give you some options to set the speed limit, what type are you running, turbo, manual. So if you were to set up manual, you can set up your minimum. This is the upper temperature where it's going to kick into 100%. Here's your lower temperature, and here's the minimum that it's going to run at, 60% performance. So again, if you're running water cooling, you'll go ahead and disable this wherever you have the pump plugged into. So let's say you have the pump plugged into the CPU fan header, which is where you should have it. You'll set this to disabled so the power management for that particular fan header doesn't speed up or slow down the fan. We went ahead and set all of these to auto and enabled. 9 times out of 10 coming through here, these are good if you want to build a cool and quiet system so that the fans are not running at 100% all the time and making a ton of noise. You can adjust this, get it pretty granular to where it's going to make noise when it needs to, so the fans will spin up when it does, and when it doesn't, it'll stay quiet and run in the background. And Asus's fan controls have been pretty good. They actually work very well just to keep things spun up and cool. You see that you have the fan expert in there, so when you have this plugged in, you can actually set up even kind of, I don't want to say more advanced controls, but you can set up some additional configurations inside there to make sure that your system is staying cool, but also is not becoming so loud that it's annoying. Your boot here, this is your boot options. All of these are pretty self-explanatory. You can display the logo if you want. You can also set it to full screen, or you can turn it off. We just leave that to auto. Doesn't have any effect on performance, but you might not want to have it come up. Hardware fast boot, that's going to bypass a lot of the boot screens. We turn that off so we can see what's going on, especially when overclocking. Network stack driver support. So when you turn this, the network stack driver is going to be disabled. What that's going to do is it's not going to say, hey, can I try and boot off of the network? All right, post delay time, how long between the logo and the actual post. You have your setup mode, compatibility support, secure boot. This is, of course, for Windows 8. So the secure boot is going to let you install or run operating systems like Windows 8. That's built in. And of course, you have your different boot options, and you can take a look at CD-ROM or hard drive boot priorities, which if you have multiple drives in there, you just tell it which one you want. And the last menu item is going to be your tools, your Easy Flash 2 OC profile. This is where you can store different profiles if you want. And SPD information is going to tell you what your memory is capable of doing in what slot. So you can see we have our Kingston RAM. It's capable, it runs at JDEC. If you just drop it in, don't do anything, it's 1333. XMP2 is your basic 1600 megahertz, and XMP1 is 2133. And these are your different voltage profiles and your different timings that is going to pull automatically from the memory to get to those speeds. So that covers everything in the UEFI BIOS. We didn't go into too much details about the individual settings. There are a ton in here. Asus has always been good about building in options that you need to push your processor, push your memory, and get the kind of the best performance experience if you're willing to go this route to get there. They push these down into almost their entire line now. So even in what you would consider a channel board, that's a board that's going to go out, mass market. It's not really intended to be an overclocking board. At least that's not its core design. Even those boards are set up in such a way, and they have the same options that you would have on your upper level overclocking boards. The Z87-Expert is probably in between the upper levels, and it's definitely not a Republic of Gamers board, but it's also not a channel board, and it still has a lot of the same overclocking features and overclocking potential that you would see in an Republic of Gamers board. And Asus has done a great job of getting the UEFI BIOS clean. It's quick, it's fast, it's not going to be a pain to move around. You just get what you need done, and you can get out and get on with playing around with your computer. So that covers everything we need to talk about with the UEFI BIOS, and we'll move on to performance next.